The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of David Brooks's corner office, each droplet a reminder of the storm that had been brewing in his chest for 5 years. He stared at the city below, watching people hurry along the sidewalks, with their umbrellas and hopes. While he remained untouchable in his tower of success, his phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. Another board meeting. Another acquisition, another milestone that should have felt meaningful, but didn't. David had built his tech company, Nexus Solutions, from nothing more than a laptop and determination. Now, at 32, he was worth more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, yet he felt emptier than when he'd started. Mr. Brooks? His assistant, Jennifer, peered through the doorway. "Ah! The car is ready for the charity event. The Children's Hope Foundation is expecting you in an hour." David nodded, straightening his tie with mechanical precision. These events were part of his image now as a successful entrepreneur giving back to the community. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd be speaking about hope to children when he'd systematically removed every trace of it from his own life. As he rode through the rain-soaked streets, his mind drifted to Leah Monroe. It always did during quiet moments, despite his best efforts to bury those memories. 5 years ago, she'd been his everything, the nurse with gentle hands and a laugh that could chase away his darkest moods. She'd believed in him when his company was failing, when investors were pulling out, when he could barely afford rent. But love, he'd learned, was a luxury he couldn't afford. When his startup began its death spiral, when creditors called daily, and his business partner abandoned ship, David made the hardest decision of his life. He ended things with Leah not because he stopped loving her, but because he loved her too much to drag her into his disaster. The conversation replayed in his mind like a broken record. Her tears, her pleas to let her help, her confusion when he simply walked away without explanation. He'd changed his phone number that same night, moved across the state for a last-ditch investment opportunity, and forced himself to forget. It was the only way to survive. What he hadn't expected was that survival would feel so much like death. Now, as his car pulled up to St. Mary's Children's Hospital, David straightened his shoulders and prepared to play his role. The successful businessman who had it all figured out, the philanthropist who understood the value of giving back, the man who definitely wasn't haunted by the ghost of a love he'd been too afraid to fight for. The hospital's lobby buzzed with activity volunteers, setting up displays, children's artwork adorning the walls, and the soft hum of hope that seemed to permeate pediatric wards everywhere. David forced a smile as the foundation director approached, her enthusiasm infectious despite his emotional armor. He had no idea that in just a few minutes, his carefully constructed world would shatter with the sound of 3 familiar laughs. Asterisk, the pediatric wing of St. Mary's Hospital smelled like antiseptic and hope, a combination that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. David followed Dr. Patricia Wells, the chief of pediatrics, down corridors lined with colorful murals painted by young patients. His prepared speech about corporate responsibility and giving back felt increasingly hollow with each step. "The children are so excited to meet you," Dr. Wells was saying, her voice warm with genuine affection for her patients. "Many of them have heard about your company's scholarship program? You're quite the inspiration, Mr. Brooks." David smiled politely, though the word inspiration sat uneasily in his chest. How could he inspire anyone when he'd built his success on the foundation of running away from everything that mattered? They paused outside the playroom, where the sound of children's laughter drifted through the partially open door. Dr. Wells was explaining the hospital's programs when David heard a sound that stopped his heart mid-beat. 3 distinct laughs, harmonizing in a way that was achingly familiar, like an echo from a dream he'd tried to forget. "Excuse me," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse. "Those children, ... double quotes." Dr. Wells smiled. "Oh, that's probably the Monroe triplets. They're not patients. Their mother works here. Aaliyah is one of our best nurses, and sometimes she brings them by after school. Adorable kids, though they can be quite the handful when they're together." Monroe. The name hit him like a physical blow. It couldn't be the same. Leah Monroe was her maiden name, not her married name. She must have gotten married, started a family, built the life he'd been too cowardly to give her. The thought should have brought relief, but instead it carved a deeper hollow in his chest. Would you like to meet them? Dr. Wells asked, mistaking his stunned silence for curiosity. The children love meeting visitors, and Leah. Well, she's wonderful with everyone. Before David could form a response, the playroom door swung open, and a small tornado of energy burst through. 3 children, unmistakably siblings, raced down the hallway in a game of tag. 2 identical boys with dark hair and bright eyes, followed by a girl with the same coloring but softer features. David's world tilted on its axis. The children skidded to a halt when they saw the adults, suddenly remembering their manners. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 5, smiled up at Dr. Wells with gap-toothed charm.
Sorry, Dr. Wells. We were just playing chase.
That's quite all right, Emma, Dr. Wells chuckled. Boys, come say hello to our visitor. The 2 boys approached with the careful politeness of children who'd been taught good manners. I'm Luke, said the first, extending a small hand with serious formality. This is my brother Marcus. David stared at them, his heart hammering against his ribs. Luke had his eyes, the same deep green that stared back at him from mirrors. Marcus had his stubborn chin, the same one that had gotten David into countless childhood scrapes. And Emma, ... Emma had his smile. The lopsided grin that Leah used to say was his most dangerous weapon.
Nice to meet you, David,
managed his voice, sounding foreign to his own ears. He knelt down to their level, studying their faces with desperate intensity. How old are you? We're 5, Emma announced proudly. All of us. We're triplets, which means we shared the same space before we were born. Mom says we've been causing trouble together since before we could even breathe. 5 years old? The timeline crashed over David like a wave, stealing his breath and leaving him gasping for understanding. These children, it would have been born 9 months after he left Leah. 9 months after he'd walked away from the only woman he'd ever loved, because he was too afraid to fight for their future. David. The voice that had haunted his dreams for 5 years spoke his name from behind him, soft and uncertain and achingly familiar. David rose slowly, afraid that sudden movements might shatter whatever fragile reality had brought him to this moment. When he turned, Leah Monroe stood in the doorway of the playroom, her nurse's scrubs pristine despite what must have been a long shift. She looked exactly as he remembered, those warm brown eyes, the gentle curve of her smile, the way she tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear when she was nervous. Except now she wasn't smiling. She was staring at him with a mixture of shock, pain, and something that might have been relief. Mommy. Emma bounced over to Leah, wrapping her arms around her mother's legs. This nice man came to visit the hospital. His name is David, just like the David you tell us stories about sometimes. Leah's face went pale, and David saw her hands tremble as she smoothed Emma's hair. The David from her stories. His throat constricted as he realized what that meant she'd told their children about him. Somehow, impossibly, he existed in their world even though he'd never known they existed in his. Dr. Wells, Leah said carefully, never taking her eyes off David, would it be possible for the children to finish their snack in the break room? I think Mr. Brooks and I need to talk. Dr. Wells, sensing the undercurrents she couldn't possibly understand, quickly ushered the triplets away. With promises of cookies and juice boxes, Luke looked back over his shoulder at David with curious eyes, his familiar eyes before disappearing around the corner. The silence stretched between them, like a chasm filled with 5 years of unspoken words. Finally, Leah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I tried to call you, she said, when I found out I was pregnant, but your number was disconnected, and your apartment was empty. Your business partner said you'd moved away, that you didn't. Want to be contacted? David closed his eyes, remembering his desperate flight from everything that reminded him of his failures. Leah, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. I know. Her voice was steady now, though tears gathered in her eyes. I figured that out eventually. You wouldn't have. You're not the kind of man who would abandon his children if he knew they existed. The word children hit him like a physical blow. Children, plural. 3 beautiful, bright, impossible children who carried his features and her kindness. They're mine, he said, and it wasn't a question. Yes. Leah's voice broke on the single syllable. Luke, Marcus, and Emma. They're yours, David. They've always been yours, even when you weren't here to claim them. David sank into one of the plastic chairs that lined the hallway, his legs suddenly unable to support him. 5 years, he whispered. I've missed 5 years of their lives because I was a coward. You weren't a coward, Leah said, sitting across from him. You were scared. There's a difference. I was scared too, David. Terrified, actually. When I realized I was carrying triplets and you were gone, I didn't know how I was going to manage. But you did. He looked up at her, seeing the strength she'd always possessed, but that had grown deeper, more resilient. You raised them alone. You gave them everything they needed. Leah smiled through her tears. They're incredible kids. Luke is the serious one. He reads everything he can get his hands on and asks questions that would stump a philosophy professor. Marcus is the adventurer, always climbing something or building something or taking something apart to see how it works. And Emma, Emma is the heart of our little family. She makes friends with everyone and sees magic in the most ordinary things. As she spoke, David could see the love shining in her eyes, the fierce protective devotion of a mother who'd poured everything into her children. These weren't just his children, they were hers, shaped by her love and sacrifice and strength. Do they know about me? He asked. They know their father is a good man who had to go away before they were born, Leah said carefully. They know he would love them if he could be with them. I never wanted them to feel abandoned or unwanted. David's chest ached with gratitude and grief. Even after he'd left her, even when she'd faced the impossible challenge of raising triplets alone, Leah had protected his memory. She'd given their children a father they could be proud of, even when the real father had failed them all. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty at this late hour. Fluorescent lights humming over scattered tables where a few staff members grabbed quick meals between shifts. David sat across from Leah, 2 cups of terrible coffee growing cold between them as they navigated the minefield of 5 years' worth of unspoken truths. I should have fought harder to find you, Leah said, stirring sugar into her coffee with absent movements. But honestly, David, I was so hurt and confused when you left. I thought maybe you'd somehow known about the pregnancy and that's why you ran. David's heart clenched. God, no. Leah, if I had known. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their time together. I left because I thought I was protecting you. The company was failing. I was drowning in debt, and I couldn't bear the thought of dragging you down with me. That should have been my choice to make, she said quietly, but without anger. We could have figured it out together. I know that. Now, I've known it for 5 years. But I was too proud and too ashamed to come back and admit I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Leah studied his face, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with beneath the expensive suit and careful composure. What happened after you left? Your company obviously didn't fail. David laughed bitterly. Actually, it did fail. Completely. I lost everything and had to start over from scratch. It took 3 years of 18-hour days and living on ramen noodles before Nexus Solutions finally took off. By then, I'd convinced myself it was too late to come back. That you'd moved on, found someone better. There was never anyone better, Leah said softly. There was never anyone else at all. The kids and my work, that was enough. It had to be enough. The weight of lost time settled between them, heavy and irreversible. But before David could sink too deeply into regret, the sound of familiar laughter echoed from the nearby children's area where Dr. Wells was keeping the triplets entertained. They're amazing, Leah. You've done something incredible with them. You've done something incredible with me, she corrected. I was so lost after you left, David. Finding out I was pregnant was terrifying, but it was also ... salvation. They gave me purpose. It made me stronger than I ever thought I could be. David watched through the glass partition as Luke helped Emma reach a book from a high shelf while Marcus built an elaborate tower from blocks. His children. The thought still felt surreal, like a dream he might wake up from at any moment. 8. Happens now? He asked. I don't want to disrupt their lives, but God, Leah, I want to know them. I want to be part of their world if you'll let me. Leah was quiet for a long moment, her eyes focused on their children. They've asked about you, you know. Especially Luke. He's the one who thinks the most about what he's missing. I've always told them that their father loves them, even though he can't be with them. But they're smart kids, David. They won't just accept you because of biology. I wouldn't expect them to, David said quickly. I want to earn their trust, their affection. I want to prove that I'm worthy of being their father. And what about us? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and fear. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, David. Motherhood changes you. I'm stronger now, but I'm also more cautious. I can't afford to let someone into our lives who might leave again when things get difficult. David reached across the table, his fingers hovering just above hers. I'm not the same person either. I've spent 5 years learning that success means nothing if you don't have anyone to share it with. I won't make the same mistake twice, Leah. I swear to you in their lives. On whatever chance we might have, I won't run again. Leah looked down at his hand, so close to hers, then back up at his face. She saw sincerity there, and pain, and hope. But she also saw the man who had walked away once before, and trust once broken was not easily repaired. You'll take it. Slow, she said finally. You can meet them properly, spend time with them. But David, if you're going to be their father, you have to be all in. They can't be a weekend hobby or a way to ease your guilt. They deserve better than that. They deserve everything, David said fiercely, and I want to give it to them. Not just money or things, but time, attention, love. Everything I should have been giving them from the beginning. Through the glass, Emma looked up and waved at them, her gap-toothed grin lighting up her whole face. David waved back, his heart swelling with an emotion too large for his chest to contain. He was a father. After 5 years of emptiness, he was. A father to 3 incredible children who deserved the world. Now he just had to prove he was worthy of the title. 6 weeks later, David found himself at Riverside Park on a Saturday morning, pushing Emma on a swing while Luke and Marcus raced around the playground equipment like tiny hurricanes. The early October air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and the sound of children's laughter had become the soundtrack to his new life. Higher, Daddy David, Emma called out, her legs pumping with determination. She'd started calling him that 3 weeks ago, the title emerging naturally from her 5-year-old logic. He wasn't just David anymore, but he wasn't quite Daddy either, not yet. The compromise felt perfect, a bridge between who he'd been and who he was becoming. Hold on tight, he warned, giving her swing another gentle push. His heart still caught every time she called him that, the words like a gift he was still learning to accept. Marcus came running over, breathless and grass-stained. Daddy David, come see what we built. Luke designed it, but I did all the engineering. David grinned, recognizing his own childhood enthusiasm for grandiose projects and his son's excitement. Engineering, huh? That's pretty advanced work for a 5-year-old. Almost 6, Marcus corrected with the seriousness that only children could. Muster about such matters. And Luke says engineering is just fancy problem solving, and I'm really good at solving problems. They walked over to where Luke had constructed an elaborate fort from fallen branches and playground equipment. It was impressive work for someone so young, structured, thoughtful, clearly planned rather than thrown together. David knelt down to examine the architecture, genuinely impressed. This is incredible, Luke. You really thought this through. Luke beamed with pride, but then his expression grew more serious. Daddy David, can I ask you something? Of course, you can ask me anything. Are you going to stay this time? The question hit David like a physical blow, all the more powerful for its quiet simplicity. He looked at Luke, this brilliant, thoughtful little boy who had inherited not just his eyes, but apparently his tendency to cut straight to the heart of things. Yes, David said without hesitation. I'm going to stay. I know I wasn't here before, and I know that might make it hard to believe me, but I promise you, not going anywhere. Luke studied his face with the intensity of someone far older than his years. Mom says promises are important. She says you should only make them if you're sure you can keep them. Your mom is very smart, David agreed, and I'm sure I want to be here for all of you, for everything, good days and bad days, to school plays and scraped knees. birthdays, and bedtime stories. All of it. From across the playground, David caught sight of Leah sitting on a bench, watching them with a soft smile. Over the past 6 weeks, they'd been carefully rebuilding, not just his relationship with the children, but with each other. It was different now, deeper, but more cautious. Built on the foundation of who they'd become rather than who they'd been. Emma abandoned her swing and ran over to join them. "Are we having a family meeting?" she asked, inserting herself into the circle with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. "Something like that," David said, pulling her close. "I was just telling Luke that I'm planning to stick around for a while." "Good," Emma said matter-of-factly. "We need you. Mom tries really hard, but she's terrible at building things, and she makes the worst pancakes." "I heard that." Leah called out from her bench, laughing. Marcus plopped down beside them, grass in his hair and dirt under his fingernails. "Like having a dad," he announced. "Jake at school says his dad teaches him to throw a baseball really far." "Can you teach me to throw a baseball really far?" "I can teach you to throw a football really far, too," David offered. "How to ride a bike without training wheels, and how to build a treehouse, and about 1,000,000 other things." 1,000,000. Emma's eyes went wide. "That's a really big number." "It is," David agreed. "But we have a lot of time to get through the list." Later, as they walked back to Leah's house, their house, he was slowly beginning to think of it. David found himself carrying a sleeping Emma, while the boys ran ahead, still full of energy despite their morning at the park. Leah walked beside him, their free hands brushing occasionally as they moved. "Thank you," he said quietly, not wanting to wake Emma. "For what?" "For giving me a chance. For not letting your anger keep me from knowing them. For raising them to be so incredible." Leah was quiet for a moment. "I was angry," she admitted. "For a long time. But anger wasn't good for them, and it wasn't good for me. I had to let it go so we could all move forward." "I love you," David said suddenly, the words escaping before he could think better of them. "I know it's complicated, and I know we're taking things slow. But I need you to know I never stopped loving you, Leah. Not for a single day." Leah stopped walking, and for a moment David thought he'd ruined everything. But when she looked at him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've always loved you. Even when I hated you, I loved you." Emma stirred in his arms, mumbling something about ice cream in her sleep. They both laughed softly, the moment broken but not lost. As they reached the front door of the little house that had become home, David looked back at Luke and Marcus wrestling on the front lawn, Leah fishing for her keys, at Emma's peaceful face against his shoulder. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a successful businessman with everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. Now, he was a father, a partner, part of a family that was chaotic and beautiful and perfectly imperfect. He'd spent 5 years learning that success meant nothing without love. But these 3 little surprises, Luke with his serious questions, Marcus with his boundless energy, Emma with her gap-toothed grin, had taught him something even more important. Love meant nothing without the courage to fight for it. And this time, David Brooks was ready to fight for everything that mattered. Asterisk.